In a year where Big Ten football almost didn't happen, where change happened daily, and where fans were living in constant uncertainty, comes a season of epic proportions. A season where the Indiana Hoosiers are bolstering one of the best rosters in decades. A season where expectations couldn't be higher, and the Hoosier Network coverage could not be greater. Welcome to The Rundown, a weekly pregame show that will bring together the greatest journalism that IU sports media has to offer. Each week, our team will give you the insight, the interviews, and the facts fans need to get ready for game day can be found right here on our show. So get ready, it's game day, and The Rundown starts right now. Yes, indeed, the rundown does start right now. Happy Saturday, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to yet another exciting week where this week it's now a top 25 matchup between, well, two teams you would not really believe to be ranked where they are. You have Michigan with a 1-1 record coming off against a loss against arch rival Michigan State, in Indiana, undefeated, ranked 13th in the country, the highest rating since 1987. Almost hard to believe. How we doing? Happy Saturday. I'm Griffin Gonzalez. Beside me, Tamar. Great to be back with you. And my goodness, Indiana's ranked 13th in the country in football.
I seriously can't believe it. And what a beautiful day in Bloomington it is right now. We are able to see this Michigan-Indiana matchup. Now, Indiana has not been 2-0 to Big Ten opponents since 1991. Griffin, this is absolutely insane. Who would have thought 2020 is the year of surprises? And man, this team has really, really proven to be a great success so far.
I mean, I got to ask Tamar, you're sitting there, it's Sunday when the ratings come out, and all of a sudden you see a tweet that says Indiana's going to be ranked 13th in the country. What goes through your mind during something like that?
It's the adrenaline. I think that's what we love to see. Kirkwood Avenue, especially after that Penn State game, again in the Rutgers game, was absolutely outstanding. Everyone just comes together in Bloomington excited for this team. So that's my initial reaction is the fact that they're ranked 13th. I mean, not only, I'm not going to say I'm surprised because we were expecting this coming into the season. This is a great return of players on this Indiana team. Tom Allen is an incredible coach to lead this team forward, but I'm just full of excitement and adrenaline. My heart's pumping and racing, and I'm just excited to see what they have to produce.
Pumping and racing indeed is one way to describe it. Bottom line is this Indiana team is proving to be, well, not your average Indiana football team. 2-0. The offense is looking good. The defense might be looking better. We're going to be getting to that today. And tomorrow we got a lot going on today. Tell what else we got going on.
Actually, Griffin, we're going to be talking some Indiana soccer today. We're going to bring on Connor Hines, talking a little soccer, which is one of the top-ranked teams in the country. We're also going to be talking to Jack Ankeny, who is going to be giving us a little rundown of what happened in the Rutgers game. And we're going to be bringing on a Michigan specialist from the Daily in Michigan, right? So we have a big show coming up for you guys. A lot of great guests. It is a guest-loaded show.
And don't forget, in just a few minutes at 11 o'clock, Chronic Hoosier, the legend, Twitter famous, will be joining the show. We have a great conversation with him about this Indiana football team, the state of Indiana athletics, and just where this team will be going this year. I mean, this might be, I'm going to be honest, each week our shows have been adding more. We have not one but two Michigan people coming on. Tom Green going to be joining us later, and oh my goodness, that guy's got a personality. He's going to be fun to talk to. But tomorrow, bottom line, this is going to be a fun show.
Absolutely. And in a moment, we're going to bring on Jack Ankeny to talk a little bit about Rutgers and how Indiana was able to pull it off. Hey, Jack, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you guys doing? Thanks for having me.
And let's just start it off. I'm going to take it to you first. How did Indiana get that win? How were they able to secure it?
Right. Well, if you look at the second quarter, they put up 17 points after a pretty slow start. So you kind of saw Michael Penix and the Indiana offense really start to figure it out. Two of Rutgers' touchdowns came off of roughing the passer penalties on third down, which allowed them to later score. So I think Indiana really cleaned it up in the second half as well. and started to not kind of hurt themselves with those type of errors. I really think Indiana is a much better team than Rutgers. It looked like in the second half they were really ready to kind of blow them out. So I think really after that slow start, they really figured out what was going on in the offense.
Now, Jack, I got to ask you here. I know you were watching the game. I was too. You see that Rutgers game, and the one thing that really stood out to me is early in that one was the slow start there. It really just kind of didn't really feel great watching that one as a Hoosier fan. What was going through your mind when you saw that, and any reasoning behind that?
Well, it looked a lot like the start against Penn State, honestly, and really how Michael Penix looked for the majority of that Penn State game, really until overtime, honestly, when he made the big play. So I think it was, I don't know if he's just getting a little too excited before games. He's had a little bit of trouble just settling down in the offense. I think it'll really help him this week. He's starting to connect more with Peyton Hendershot, who's Indiana's tight end. He's really good kind of around those 5 to 15 yard passes. He's been able to find him in the red zone. I think if he can really just develop that rhythm early on, I think that'll be big into avoiding a slow start. Also, it'll be really key for the Indiana offensive line, I think, to keep Michigan out of the backfield. They have a really good defensive line, and if they're getting after Penix early on, that's really going to hurt Indiana's chances to kind of stop that trend of the slow starts.
Absolutely, and you talk about Penix, he's only getting better is what we're seeing, and I think this is going to be a really telling game to see how he brings it out on the forefront. So both of you guys, too, what do you think they improved from week 1 into week 2, and then how are they going to continue that improvement going into this Michigan game?
Right. I think when you talk about Penix's improvement, it's when he's really spreading the ball around and not even really passing the ball. But I think when they get Stevie Scott more involved in the offense, it helps with the balance, because when Penix can really hurt you in a number of ways, throwing the ball and running the ball. And when you can also bring in the run game with Stevie Scott, and then we also saw more of Samson James, it helps to keep the defense really in an unpredictable situation when you don't know what Penix is going to do, because that's when he can have a threat of all the talent that he has. When he can use any of those abilities, that's when he's at his best, I think.
Yeah, and I'm going to piggyback off of that. I think the other thing, Jack, is I feel like we're not doing this defense justice quite just yet, because we all want to talk about Michael Penix. We all want to talk about Stevie Scott. The bottom line is Micah McFadden might have been the star of the show last week. I mean, the guy was almost on every single tackle. And the bottom line is this Indiana defense is just it used to be the reason they lost games. Now it very well could be the reason they're winning them.
Yeah, I think it was a huge reason that they beat Penn State in the first week, having a lot of those really timely turnovers. Now, you can't really count on those on a game-to-game basis to come in kind of those perfect situations, but you're right, Griffin. It has been the defense that's what is keeping Indiana in these games. We've talked a lot today about just the slow starts with Penix, and if the defense were to have a start like that, I'm not sure that they win that Penn State game. Just because of how slow the offense was at the beginning. We talked a lot about kind of the secondary and how good they've been. I think that's developing as the best group on this Indiana team. Like you said, Micah McFadden, he's kind of that leader of the defense at the linebacker spot. And I also think the defensive line has been better than we anticipated coming into the season.
Well, Jack, I think I want to talk a little bit more about this defense because, like I said, I feel like they're a little under-talked about. I guess I really want to ask you to hone in here because, like I said, we've seen where the defense has cost games. We've seen where Indiana's given up fourth-quarter drives, and it's almost like for a defensive coach that Tom Allen is, this has been the most frustrating Indiana defense to watch over the past few years. Now you're kind of seeing the pride of this Indiana team being shown through that defensive play. What's different this year from other years? Because honestly, the names on the roster have not changed that much.
Well, that's kind of it, Griffin. The names haven't changed much, and that means that you're getting guys more experience. The last couple of years, maybe you're playing a couple freshmen and sophomores that aren't really kind of that Big Ten caliber starter, but now you're seeing them really grow into great players. Tom Allen talked about how he thought Reese Taylor and Jalen Williams played their best games as Hoosiers against Rutgers. So I think you're seeing that just overall development throughout the position groups. And then when you look at kind of the three tiers of the defense, you can highlight a guy like Micah McFadden, Tywan Mullen, that they're kind of those, potential first, second team all Big Ten guys that they're really developing into leaders and saying, hey guys, like we can do this if you just, if you kind of follow how they're playing. And I think McFadden is a guy that you can really highlight that. Before the season, Womack was talking about how he thought he started to develop into a leader. And so I think you kind of get that belief once you have those kind of 2-star guys in Mullen and McFadden to kind of say, hey, let's go. We can be a dominant defense. And that's what they've been. And that's why they're winning games.
All right, Jack, I cannot let you go without asking about the wild play in the Rutgers game. Give me your thoughts. What was going through your head when that play was being done?
Yeah, I actually started writing after the game. I kind of thought it was the game was decided at that point, so I started writing my post-game article, and I look up at the TV, and it's just lateral here, lateral there. I don't know if it was 8 or 9 plays. Yeah, that was one of the craziest football plays I've honestly ever seen. Luckily, it got called back with the penalty. I don't think it would have really affected the outcome, but yeah, that was pretty insane. I think you saw the one Rutgers offensive lineman at one point just literally chuck it behind his head. So, yeah, I don't really know what to say more about that play though.
I mean, I think just kind of going back to it, it was probably one of the most uncomfortable plays I think I've ever had to watch. He was just when the offensive lineman literally just kind of threw it back and said, "I'm done. No, I'm not going down. I don't want it to be touched. I'm just threw it back." And somehow some guy, oh man, I would say it's the most Rutgers, Indiana football play I've ever seen in my life. I mean,
it seriously looked like a video game. That's how insane it was. And I know Tom Allen at the end of the game was remarking that the officials came up to him and said, hey, you can breathe. There was a pass that was thrown forward, and that was just that sigh of relief. And it was just typical Indiana Rutgers, but just a crazy, crazy end to what was an amazing game to watch.
Yes, indeed. Jack, I know you're coming back on later in the show to talk just a few minutes about IU being ranked 13th and what that means for this program. So stick around. We'll be right back with you. We'll see you soon.
All right.
Well, Tamar, there you have it. Jack Ankeny joining us. And, very good insight from him there.
Absolutely. And I just think what this proves is that Indiana still has things to do in order to get the win today against Michigan. I mean, their defensive dominance is where it's at right now, but their offense still has some things to work on. So I think that if Penix comes out and he is able to produce earlier on, so we're given that little sigh of relief that he can make that execution early on and stray away from those penalties, I think that'll be a game changer. And now we are going to be transitioning into a little men's soccer talk soon with Connor Hines, so make sure you stick around for that. But in the moment, we're still going to talk about a little bit of a Michigan preview.
On our first day of training, we're definitely riding a high, and then a couple hours later, it's by the way, you guys aren't playing any games this fall, which was definitely tough news.
The last 2 months for IU men's soccer have been anything but normal. But with the NCAA's announcement that all fall sports will now be eligible to play this spring, college soccer has a shot to turn an awful situation into opportunity. For years, leaders in college soccer have supported stretching the season into a full academic year in the hopes of better preparing athletes for professional careers and to restore the student and student athlete. But now,
our goal is to have a fall and a spring season, and then an 8-week periodization recovery, and then get right back in it. That's what the rest of the world does in our sport. It's a 9 to 10 month season.
This is the 21st century model. Play less matches during the normal fall season and pick up the rest in the spring.
Most importantly, it would give us a really good view of what it looks like in the spring with some of the different challenges that other schools might have. Maybe not as much here, but with weather, facility usage. This will be a good little beta test for that.
Coach Yeagley and many other leaders in the sport have supported this plan for years. But in 2020, nothing's being left off the table. The spring season would bring college soccer closer than ever to finally making the jump. And meanwhile, not much else changes for that team in search of its ninth star.
It's almost not like we're not preparing for any other opponent. It's just been delayed a little bit. So everyone's sights are still set on eventually competing. It's just, like I said, been delayed a little bit.
To get back on the field this year and be the start of something special, that's more than anyone could have expected just a month ago.
Now we are about to welcome in Connor Hines into the studio to talk a little men's soccer. So thanks for that package, Connor. How you doing? What's going on? You're in Bloomington?
Doing great. We are in Bloomington, getting ready for some football today. How are you guys?
Great. Now let's talk men's soccer. One of the top-ranked teams in the country for soccer programs. Where does this team stand right now? You're the soccer expert.
I mean, look, Indiana just finds a way to reload year after year. And, they lost Josh Penn and Jack Mayer this past offseason to the professional ranks. Josh Penn with the second most goals on the team. I mean, this is a year after year thing for Indiana. They lose their best players, and then they find a way to reload. 2 seasons ago, they lost one of the best Indiana soccer teams I think that anybody has seen in the last couple of decades, and still were able to do everything they did a season ago. So that's what makes up a great team. That's what makes up a great program, a program like Todd Yeagley's. So I don't think we should really foresee any trouble for Indiana. They're still going to be at the top of the Big Ten, competing with the rest of them. It's just a bit of a different look, I guess.
Right, and Yeagley said in particular that this team is mentally tough. And when they came back from the summer, they were able to really produce because they had that fitness that they needed to come back and execute, whether there was a season or not. So I think that speaks volumes to the kind of team that Indiana has as well. And what, in your opinion, what expectations can we set for this team going into the spring?
I think you should expect Indiana to be right up at the top of the Big Ten again with the likes of Maryland and the rest of them. I mean, we saw what they were able to do last year, even having lost everybody that they lost, getting back to the Big Ten tournament championship, winning the Big Ten tournament again. And then, of course, kind of a stunner in the NCAA tournament, losing to UC Santa Barbara. But don't mistake yourself. This is still Indiana soccer, regardless of the circumstances around it. Really liked what Roman Celentano was able to do in the goal last year, stepping up as a freshman. I mean, these are young, new guys who are recruited to Indiana for a reason. I mean, it's a bona fide program all the way around. So I don't think you should expect anything different from Indiana going into the spring. The one thing I've noticed, Tamar, since day one is that this team has not wavered, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of the amount of certainty or uncertainty with Indiana. They've just taken it like any other business. They've continued to do what they've done really since day one. And even without games this fall, they've continued to train, continued to be Indiana soccer. And you better believe they'll be ready for a spring season when that comes around.
8 national championships, 16 Big Ten regular season crowns, 14 conference tournament titles. The list goes on and on and on. So that prediction is great. So they are that title-winning team that you can see being successful this season, no matter what the unprecedented times are. So that was a great analysis, Connor. Thanks so much. And on the front of the team aspect, so you got the returning players of Spencer Glass, AJ Palazzola, Thomas Moore. So talk a little bit about the cohesiveness of this team, because they have a strong knit bond that is unbreakable inside.
Yeah, they definitely do. And I think that's just something that comes with the culture of the program. That's something that comes when you're led by a guy like Todd Yeagley, who was raised by a guy like his dad, Jerry Yeagley. I mean, that lineage, you just can't overstate that. But I mean, yeah, the players you alluded to there, Spencer Glass, AJ Palazzola, they were kind of the guys sort of waiting in the shadows, waiting in the wings, because you had such a talented pool of players who came to Indiana over the past 2, 3, 4 seasons. And now a guy like Spencer Glass really gets his opportunity to lead. And I don't know if his personality or mindset changes at all this season, but he just gets to sort of bask in that role that much more. So I'm really excited to see what those guys do. because, regardless of who's leading your team, you're the leader of the Indiana soccer program for a reason. You don't just get recruited by Indiana because you play soccer. You get recruited because you're one of the best recruits in the nation. So Spencer Glass has been here since day one, and I see him as the guy, the senior leader, with that lethal left foot. So only time will tell, but I think Indiana has a plethora of leaders at their disposal, a plethora of talented players at their disposal. Again, I don't think much changes this spring, regardless of the circumstances.
Well, Connor, thank you so much for joining us, talking a little soccer, a little diversion from the football talk, but really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. You guys have a good one. Let's go Hoosiers.
All right, Connor Hines joining us there, talking a little IU soccer. We're going to get back to football, though, the other kind, the American kind, because that's what we have coming up just here in a few hours. Not even that, less than a few hours, I should say. Bottom line is, listen, Indiana's ranked 13th in the country. This is something they're not used to. The last time they were ranked 13th in the country, don't worry, IU is still a basketball school because, well, it was 1987. IU's just coming off their national championship. Might I add, the last national championship IU basketball had. We saw a lot of great football for IU in the 80s and 90s, but now we're seeing a different type. Now they're playing with some of the best in the nation. Penn State, Michigan, possibly Ohio State down the road, and more to come. So we're going to talk about what this impact is. We're bringing back in Jack Ankeny. We're not letting him go yet. He's still got plenty of work to do for us today. Don't worry, Jack. Jack, I guess I want to start off by asking, 13th in the nation. That's a big deal. What has changed with this program over the past 5-10 years that have gotten them to this point where they have not been able to be for over 30 years?
Program like Indiana, the growth starts with recruiting, because you're not going to beat teams like Penn State, compete with teams like Michigan, if you don't purely just have the talent. So I think that's number one. It starts there. But I think two, which is also a huge factor, is there's a sense of belief in this program. I think Tom Allen is someone who really can latch onto the emotions of his players, and they're buying into it. And I also think kind of just the excitement surrounding the program, just on campus, just around IU fans, there's a sense that they're kind of believing in what Tom Allen said when he got to IU 3-4 years ago.
What then, Jack, do you think this says about Tom Allen, who is one of those dominant coaches in the Big Ten, as he's proving to be right now? And he has that mentality, that team mentality of LEO, love each other. What does this mean for his program that they are so successful now?
Yeah, well, I think his predictions when he got here in 2016, they're starting to kind of come true. They're not there yet, definitely. I think there's still a lot to accomplish this season. But I think they're showing that what he said wasn't just hot air. He really believed it, and he's kind of making it happen. He's really gotten guys to buy in, like I've said. And I think what is overlooked about this Indiana team is Tom Allen. He's a defensive guy, but he didn't really let that stop him from building a good offense. This year everyone expected the Indiana offense to be kind of its strong suit, and it still could be as they kind of get more comfortable with each other over the years. But I think that's really a testament to Allen, just his ability to just with the coordinators, hiring Nick Sheridan within the program. I think he's really not letting that defensive mentality that where he's rooted in take over how this team is going to be. Even though the defense is so strong, he hasn't overlooked that, and I think you're going to see this Indiana offense really improve throughout the year.
I think the other thing that's kind of refreshing to see is we talk about Tom Allen, and I think it's very rare. We hear every day on ESPN a new coach getting in trouble. It's very rare to see a football coach leading a program with integrity and character. And it doesn't matter if the top guy wants to come to your school. If he doesn't fit your character, he's not coming. It's very refreshing to see. And I guess, Jack, at what point does Indiana reach the amount of success where that's going to stop working? I guess. Where's the line in the sand? Because at some point, you are going to have to, when you get up and up and up, you're eventually going to have to be like, okay, when do we stop recruiting character and just going talent? Is that something that's even in Tom Allen's window?
Yeah, I think that's really tough to say, Griffin, and I think that that's something that we're not really going to see the true outcome for. It could be, 5, 10 years, depending on how long Tom Allen is here. But I think the foundation of this program is going to be that character, kind of that integrity, like you were talking about. But if Indiana wants to get to the level of beating Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, some of those teams, getting numerous top 25 wins on a year-to-year basis, it's going to have to start getting that top level talent, because you're not beating an Ohio State with the current talent on this Indiana roster, barring some kind of huge upset. That's kind of what it comes down to a lot of times in college football. So I think Indiana is not at the point where they're going to where Tom Allen is going to scratch what he's, kind of that character, like you're talking about, recruiting character over talent, because I think he believes that's really important, and I believe that too. So I don't think it's time yet for Indiana to kind of stray away from the foundation of this program and that character, like you were talking about.
So then, should IU fans, Jack, get used to this kind of success? Do you think that Tom Allen's going to be able to get his team to where they need to be by the end of the season to prove everyone wrong? Because he's already done that, but is he going to continue that success with his team?
Right. So I think today's game is a huge deciding factor in that. And it also kind of really adjusts pretty significantly that gauge of success, because if you finish the season, one ranked win and it's over Penn State and you lost all the other ranked games, but if you can, that's a huge difference compared to saying, hey, we beat Penn State and Michigan this year. So I think moving forward, it is realistic for IU fans to expect or like desire kind of that one big top 10 or top 25 win. I don't think it's at the point yet where you can expect multiple big time wins, but I think it's growing, and it could be to that point sometime in the near future.
Jack, I know this one's going to be a little tough to answer here, but it's one I actually want to talk about. You beat a top 10 team, something you have not been able to do. You're 2-0. You're ranked 13th in the country. You're doing things that people said Tom Allen would never be able to do. So I think the question becomes now, we're on week 3. Has IU already kind of done what they wanted to do this season?
I think in a way they have, if you kind of step away from where they are currently at, because if they go to the end of the year and you can say that Indiana accomplished things like win over Penn State, 13 ranking, I think going into the year, that would have been obviously that they're achieving the goals. Now I think that they've already had this success early on in the season. There's definitely chances for Indiana to kind of, at the end of this season, maybe be, we're a little disappointed. We think we could have accomplished more. Tom Allen said in the press conference this week, Griffin Epstein for the Hoosier Network asked him kind of what are those tangible goals, and he said a Big Ten championship, and I still think Indiana is pretty far away from achieving that. But I think when you just start listing the accomplishments of this season and then think big picture, I think this is a great step in the right direction for this Indiana program and for what Tom Allen is building.
All right, the question that everyone is asking these days, is IU becoming a football school like it is a basketball school?
You're careful. You got a lot of IU fans watching right now, Jack. Careful.
Right. No, I don't think it is. I think most of the time when people say that IU is a football school, it comes with a good deal of sarcasm. I think people want it to be because it's super exciting when you can get wins over Penn State. But I still think that is a long way from happening. I think people care more about an IU team that's, on the tournament bubble like they have been the last couple of years. I think people care more about a team like that than they do about a successful Indiana football team. Even if, they were to get another top 25 win this year, I still think it's going to take a long time to get to that point. I think, though, in kind of shifting to more of the football school argument, I think this year it really hurts without fans in the stadium, because this could have been a year where students were actually staying for more than half the game. So I think I feel bad for Indiana football in that respect, because there's not quite the buzz that I think there would be if there were fans in the stadium. But I still think there's a pretty good amount of time until you can call it a football school over basketball.
There we go. Jack Ankeny joining us there. A little technical difficulties. Jack, thanks for hopping on. Appreciate it. Now we get to move into arguably one of the more exciting interviews we've done here on the show. Chronic Hoosier, Twitter famous for a lot of reasons, but mainly interacting with IU fans and getting them rallied up for games and just being that unfiltered voice that I think everyone needs nowadays. Let's go ahead and check out this interview with Chronic Hoosier.
All right, special guest joining us this week here on The Rundown. He has been, I guess you could say, Twitter famous amongst Hoosiers. Since I was in 8th grade is when I started following him, which she said probably isn't a good thing. But, I think it's a good thing. It was good content from an early age and good to get that IU bloodstream going. But joining us now is Chronic Hoosier. Chronic, thanks so much for coming on. I guess my first thing, how are you doing? Are you staying healthy? Are you feeling good?
I am doing well. First, thank you so much for having me on. I'm not going to cast judgment on your parents for letting you follow me in 8th grade, but I do feel like I'm the guy that was just dropping drugs out of his pocket as he walked past the playground, because I know I corrupted you in some way, totally unintentionally. So apologies to the whole family, but it looks like you made it out great, man. I'm doing well. I am a little tired this week, man. It's been kind of a wild week. Everything going on. Between COVID, between IU athletics, all of a sudden, 13th ranked. There was this big vote we took this week, and we're still figuring. It's just been wild. Unfortunately, I have had COVID near me, and we're just trying to do everything we can to keep the ship upright. So it's resulted in a lot of hours here for me the last 2 weeks. But most importantly, everybody is well. Everybody's really, really looking forward to this weekend, man. And of all the times not to allow Indiana fans into Memorial Stadium, I can't think of one. I thought Penn State was going to be the superlative. It's just absolutely brutal on what's going to be a gorgeous November day. Indiana ranked higher than Michigan coming to the Rock. There's some special stuff in the air right now, man.
It's a big week when IU football is ranked 13th in the nation. It doesn't feel like it's big news. It just kind of gets mixed up with everything else going on. But I guess that's where we're kind of start our conversation today. Is when you look at this Indiana football team, it feels like this is abnormal. It goes right in with the theme of 2020, but it does feel normal. Is this something we should be getting used to? Is this what we're going to see in the future with IU football?
That was my number one question coming out of the offseason this year, with the Gator Bowl appearance and just how close they were pulling off their biggest bowl win possibly ever. It was, would they be able to sustain the momentum? Because it was absolutely everything the program had been lacking for the last couple of decades. They had lightning in a bottle, and the big question was, how long does it last? Is there an expiration date on it? And then, with the postponement of the Big Ten season after they decided that we were going to do this, they pushed it down the road a little bit more, reshuffled the schedule, compressed everything. And I feel like it raised the stakes. It gave them less room for error. And I think probably my biggest takeaway right now is they've rose to the moment at both the challenges. Obviously, they came really close to letting Penn State slip away. It was the stereotypical IU heartbreak script. And, as Zach and I talked about on Mind Your Banners, it was literally the most improbable way you could break that script or flip it. And they waited until it was most impossible, improbable, and just ridiculous, and they did it. The Rutgers game last weekend, certainly Vegas felt good about Indiana's chances. That's, again, one of those games where Indiana has been known to stumble historically. So the fact that they came out, they didn't play necessarily that clean. I felt like that could have been an absolute woodshedding, but for a couple of drop passes, some flags. They had a lot of flags in that game. It's hard to fault the defense for the roughing calls they got, the personal fouls they got. Because one thing I think that also should give Hoosier fans some optimism, those to me were the product of guys that were just too keyed up for the moment. They couldn't cut it off when they had to, and some suspect officiating perhaps. But, what a great problem for an IU defense to have to dial the guys back down a little bit rather than urging them to raise that level. So I think it's going to be imperative heading into the Michigan game today that they got to play clean. We've seen far lesser IU teams be in contention, given far better Michigan teams fits late. And, but for a couple of instances of criminal officiating, more often than not, almost every time when those instances arise, Indiana's found a way to self-defeat through penalties, through errors. If they can play clean and avoid that tomorrow, I absolutely think they have a shot of taking down two big boys in just a matter of a couple of weeks in the Big Ten East. And if they can achieve that, they get a chance to back it up even further with Michigan State. But I'm telling you, this is Tom Allen's opportunity to firmly plant his stake in the Big Ten East and prove that these guys aren't a team to be pushed around anymore. And on any given Saturday, they can beat anybody. We'll see how that holds up against Ohio State. But tomorrow, I think we get a good sense of exactly where the program is in that arc, that trajectory, where they are legitimate contenders at this point.
I'm really glad you finished with Tom Allen there, because that's actually where I was going to go, because you watch this guy come in, and you come from Kevin Wilson, who was, let's be honest, inside the stadium, maybe not so great, but, got results for IU football. And then you move into this Tom Allen era, and you get that high school coach vibe, and every corner it feels he has just continued to prove that he's going to turn IU into something. So I guess my question here is for you, you watched this Tom Allen experiment kind of play out. From day one, did you believe that this would ever be a possibility for this coach to take this team this far?
I think when Tom Allen's hire as a DC was first announced, I was pretty impressed with it. I was pretty impressed with his career trajectory up to that point. Having coached in the SEC at Ole Miss with Hugh Freeze, and the arc and the continuous improvement. That's what stood out to me most of all. And then obviously, once he arrives on campus, once he does some interviews, you get a chance to kind of get a feel for who the guy is. I think a lot of us, and whether it's football, basketball, whatever, it's kind of the Tom Crean effect, where Indiana fans like to feel good. They like to feel that there's hope. Who doesn't like to feel hope, honestly? But Tom Allen had the type of charisma that made you feel good about Indiana football, that made you feel good about his vision for the program, for the culture he was trying to instill. And honestly, it's something that's been in short supply in Memorial Stadium since Terry Hepner. I think Bill Lynch is a heck of a coach. I think he's an even better human being. Bill Lynch was a fiery guy too, but he did not have that charisma. And so often, rightly or wrongly, as we're judging from the outside, looking at the program, and what limited windows we get, that's all you have to make of it. And the way in which Tom Allen's been able to inspire belief and confidence, first and foremost, his own locker room, and now that's expanded. I mean, the cynicism among IU fans, don't get me wrong, it's not like everybody's just letting their guard down and prepare to crush our souls. That's just not how Hoosiers are built. But I think we've had enough of a chance to get to know Coach Allen that people are buying what he's selling, man. And that's just snowballing for everyone as they continue to build the success, as they sustain the momentum from last year's 8-win season. And as they head into this compressed one, I mean, who knows what the metric is? And that's been one of the weird things, is you don't really know what a successful season is going to look like, because we don't know what the comparisons are going to be. We don't know how the values and the weighting is going to work. So I think it's fascinating, not the least of which, he did what was probably the hardest part of his job so far, and he kept that momentum going, some almost 10 months since he last had to hang the whistle up for the season.
We talk about kind of the state of this Indiana football program. I kind of want to ask you, since you got a good feel, 48,000 of them follow you on Twitter. I want to talk about the state of the Indiana University fan. For so long, been this, since we're in football and this is a football show, we're going to talk about it. There's been this clear basketball bias, and some would say that it actually stunted IU football for the longest time. Is that starting to go away? Or are we seeing more people proud to be IU football fans? And is the basketball brand starting to fade with irrelevancy, or is it still both strong and one's getting stronger?
I think it's a double-edged sword, man. I think from an institutional level, IU's failure to develop a more successful football program has been a big tackle preventing growth and its expansion as the Big Ten has evolved, particularly in the last decade with the introduction of the Big Ten Network. Now, it did allow them, I think critically, the Big Ten Network did allow them to get a foothold in it from a facility standpoint, taking all the money that it was now bringing in, independent of attendance and independent of TV contracts and everything else. IU was able to invest in its facilities and, to give these kids the bells and the whistles, the experience, the development that Indiana hadn't been able to do up to that point. So as that's happened, you've seen basketball kind of go through a couple of cycles where, when the Big Ten Network started, Indiana was also kind of a big pile of ashes. And, Tom Crean was able to bring them back to put Indiana back in the spotlight, back in the national conversation. And then that got really weird and it kind of fizzled. And as Indiana football really started to become ascendant, I mean, just at the early part of its arc, Indiana basketball kind of went to a weird place. And while I think it absolutely benefits the entire university when you get more engagement, more enthusiasm behind Indiana football, you now have to carry the additional baggage of apathy from your basketball fans if you can't get your legs back underneath you and, start putting consistently competitive teams on the floor. So, are you going to see a lot of people that just turn their backs on IU basketball and become sole IU football fans? I'm sure there's some of them, don't get me wrong. God bless them all. But that's always going to be a minority here. Being a child of the 80s, Gen Xer that I am, growing up in the 80s, when IU football was perennial bowl competitors, when IU basketball obviously was at its apex, but when Indiana soccer, when Indiana tennis, when Indiana swimming and diving, it really was a golden era of IU athletics. And part of it was because, a rising tide lifts all boats. And there's a potential for a synergy here with a football team that can compete night in, night out against anybody in the Big Ten East. But I don't know that IU, at least not in this modern era, I don't think IU's ever come anywhere close to sniffing just what type of synergy is available if they can figure out a way to get football and basketball good. Because Todd Yeagley's going to do crazy things over there at Armstrong. Ray Lewis is going to continue to put Olympians in the pool. Everything, Steve Aird at volleyball, Terry Morin. I mean, there's so many pieces in place right now really for this program to explode, but it's going to be such a hindrance if you can't get basketball figured out in short order.
Okay, let's close on this. You got Michigan Saturday. It's one of the first times I think in my lifetime that there's an Indiana team ranked higher than Michigan. But Michigan's still favored by 3 nonetheless, because of course. What are we going to see Saturday? What's going to happen? What do we expect?
I expect the offense to have made some headway here. I feel like we're at the point in the season where, having not had a full camp, having not had spring ball, having not really had a chance to establish a rhythm with the offense, at least in its current incarnation, I get the sense that this is going to be one of those games where it just clicks a little bit better. They were right on the cusp of it in Piscataway. I think this is the weekend that they kind of hit another gear. And I think this is hopefully they can do it from the onset, because I think in order for Indiana to win, they really need to put sustained pressure on them defense. Well, I use offense on Penn State's defense. I think Indiana's defense is certainly up to the challenge. More than anything, I think it's going to be critical for IU to establish early on some semblance of a run game, some semblance of a screen game, to keep the secondaries, to keep the linebackers honest, so that you can really open up the field for Penix. Because if anything stands out, aside from the reach earlier, that kid is just raring to go, man. I mean, I spent a lifetime around horses, and he is just biting at the bit, pulling. His arm strength, he's got so much heat on it right now. That's a guy that's really, really keyed up, and kind of like the defense, playing sharp, but having to tamp it down a little bit. I think once Penix figures out where his groove is at that speed, in that gear, I think some big things are bound to happen. And, if he can get it together and our defense can sustain what we've seen so far, particularly that Rutgers performance, I think Indiana wins by 10, to be totally honest with you. I think they're going to be the ones that win the game or lose the game on their own, because they're going to have to play a hell clean game in order to keep Harbaugh from possibly finding the front door getting a little bit closer as the season drags on here up in Ann Arbor.
Hey, we'll see for sure. It will be a fun one. Saturday, Indiana, Michigan coming up in just a few hours. Should be a really exciting matchup. Chronic, thanks so much for joining me. Appreciate you making the time to chat. And who knows, we'll be chatting soon. Maybe we'll be talking about a undefeated Indiana team here in the next few weeks.
I would love nothing more, Griff. Thanks for having me on. Keep crushing the game, man. You guys are absolutely killing it. I said it beforehand. I'm just stoked to see you guys get to flex your talents, do the thing you love, and be there with your peers, because this is every bit as much of the college experience for the students as it is for the athletes. So the whole student body may not be there, but I'm glad you guys get to stand out and show the world what you got.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Chronic Hoosier right here on the Rundown.
Hey, what's up? I'm Griffin Gonzalez. Hey, what's up? I'm Griffin Gonzalez. Back with you for the 2-minute drill as we break down the Michigan Wolverines. Are you ready? I am. Let's go. All right, so let's start with this guy named Jim Harbaugh. Okay, so Jim's hired in 2015 to bring Michigan back to their glory days. And in a way, he kind of did, because they've been constantly ranked in the top 25 since he got hired. But he has one little eensy-weensy little problem. The man cannot beat his rivals. For the life of him, he cannot do it. He is 1-6 against Michigan State and Ohio State, and that's just at home. At home. You know they play at the big house, right? Seriously, honestly, guys, the key for Indiana this week might just be come out and say that Michigan's a rivalry game. Call me crazy. I think it might work. I don't know. And here's the deal. Last week they lose to Michigan State. And what does that tell you? Well, Michigan State lost to Rutgers in week 1 at home. They're not really going to the college football playoff this year. So it's not a great loss to have for a Michigan Wolverine team that wants to be on the likes of Ohio State. Let's go ahead and break down this Michigan squad, okay? This year they are 1-1 with a win against Minnesota that looked a lot better then than it does actually right now. And 2, they lost to Michigan State last week, as we have previously discussed. Big new name that you need to know at home. His name's quarterback Joe Milton, okay? He's a dual threat quarterback, which we know Indiana has trouble with, who has 525 passing yards on the season with 1 singular touchdown. He's a decent runner, okay? He's not going to throw it all day long. Joe Milton's going to be good, right? He's going to really try to attack that Indiana defense. Running the ball, like as the running back position, is Hassan Haskins. Try saying that 10 times fast. Hassan Haskins. It's too tough. Anyway, Hassan Haskins, 9.9 yards a carry. He doesn't rush that much. 56 yards last week against Michigan State. Not going to get the job done. Looking to have a big bounce back against Indiana. Defensively, listen, there's not a lot I can say here, okay? They're not great. They're young. They're inexperienced. And the worst part of this Michigan team is their cornerbacks. Michael Penix's ears are buzzing right now, because if he's able to attack those corners, this is going to be a very long day for Michigan. Their defense, not as good as it usually is. So what should we expect in this one? Listen, I'm going to be honest. I have no clue if one of these teams is significantly better than the other or lesser than the other. Michael Penix can have a big day throwing the ball over those Michigan corners. Well, it just might very well be a very long day for the Michigan Wolverines. For the 2-minute drill, I've been Griffin Gonzalez. We'll see you next week.
Hey, Daniel, can you hear me?
Hey, yeah, I got you now.
Hey there. Sorry about
Hey.
that.
No worries.
Welcoming you in. You are a beat reporter for the Michigan Daily Writer. Let's talk Michigan. All right, now, who is this Michigan team?
This Michigan team is probably the most unique of the Harbaugh era yet. Definitely has the weakest defense so far. And on offense, they're turning over quite a few new leads. They've lost 3 of their top 4 receivers from last year. They're really young along the offensive line. Only 1 returning starter. in the backfield, it's really a three-headed snake. There's no bell cow, which is pretty uncharacteristic of Harbaugh teams. And there's a new name under center, that's Joe Milton. And quite frankly, you're seeing the results of a very young team so far.
And I hate to ask a tough question, but probably one of the worst losses in the Jim Harbaugh area was that loss last week against Michigan State. Do you have any explanation for why that was and how Michigan is planning to really try and improve going into this game against the Hoosiers?
I don't think there's any question about it. I think it was the worst loss. You can't be taking a loss at home in year 6 of the Jim Harbaugh era to a Michigan State team that committed 7 turnovers and lost to Rutgers by double digits in week 1. It's a borderline unjustifiable setback. If you go back and watch the tape, you could really single out one area, maybe not single out one area, but one area really sticks out like a sore thumb. That's the secondary. Cornerbacks Vincent Gray and Javon Green were really beat consistently over the top. Man coverage is a staple of Don Brown's defense. And if Michigan really can't answer the call defensively this year from that standpoint, they're going to have to change a lot of things. They lost both of last year's starting cornerbacks, Lavert Hill, who's now with the Kansas City Chiefs, and Ambry Thomas, who opted out to train in Arizona for the NFL draft. And you're really kind of seeing the product of not having backup plans in place. Gray played sparingly last year as a third cornerback and did a good job, but so far this year, and especially last week, that secondary as a whole has really struggled.
Right, and you talk about defense. So you talk about how they're struggling with that, those teams that have that defensive dominance like that Michigan State team had and like Indiana is proving to have. So how then do you think that Michigan is going to be able to come against Indiana and really fight against that dominant defense that we're seeing from Indiana these days?
Well, as of about a half hour ago, it got a lot harder. Starting tackles Jalen Mayfield on the right side and Ryan Hayes on the left side are both injured and did not travel to Bloomington. Indiana likes to bring a lot of pressure, and they like to do it in a lot of different ways. It was always going to be tough for Michigan to stop that with 4 new offensive linemen this year. Now it's going to be a brand new starting 5. So I think that Indiana could win this game at the line of scrimmage, and I think they will.
Talk about quarterback Joe Melton right now. What can be expected from him, and what pressure is he going to really put on the Hoosiers today?
He's truly the first homegrown quarterback of the Jim Harbaugh era. He's had recruits start here and there, but this is the first time that one of his recruits, not a transfer, has started the season as Michigan's starting quarterback. And he's done a good job for the most part. They had 225 passing yards in week 1 against Minnesota. Really showed a lot as a dual threat kind of guy. He's actually Michigan's leading rusher in both games so far, which I find pretty amusing at the quarterback position when they have 3 pretty solid running backs. But last week did a good job throwing the short to mid routes, but where Michigan really needs him is on the deep ball. He's 6'5", about 220, 240 pounds. He's a big body guy, and they need him to move the ball downfield. That's really what they talked about all off season, getting him involved with deep passes and really opening up the field vertically. And that's something that we haven't necessarily seen so far yet. If they could change that today, then they could be in for a much better offensive product.
Right, and there's no question about it. Michigan is frustrated right now. So how do you think they're going to use that frustration from the Michigan State game and go into this Indiana game and try and secure that win? Or do you think they can?
I think it's all about managing it. I think they probably spent quite a bit of time this week breaking down the film, making a long list of what went wrong last week. But I mean, it's two totally different things to identify what's wrong and then fix what's wrong. And in the past, against teams like Ohio State on an annual basis, against a couple big opponents in bowl games, they've shown an inability to correct what's been clearly going wrong. And whether or not they can fix what went wrong last week today could dictate the rest of this season.
Well, Daniel, I cannot thank you enough for coming on this show. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to see what happens. This is going to be a very telling game, and thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate you having me on. Thanks a lot.
All right, now we are going to take it to the stadium where Austin and Griffin Epstein are going to be giving you a little pregame package.
Griffin Epstein, Austin Render in the booth as Indiana takes on Michigan. Austin, 24 straight games. Michigan has defeated Indiana, but for the first time since Indiana last beat Michigan, Indiana higher in the AP poll. They're 13 in the country. Michigan is 23. However, Michigan, are they still a dangerous team? What can they do to win today?
Oh, it's very dangerous. Indiana has struggled defending the run here in the weeks 1 and 2. Joe Milton, dual threat quarterback. Sean Clifford for Penn State ran for over 100 yards. I'd expect something similar from Joe Milton, and Hassan Haskins and Charbonnet in the backfield are going to be very dangerous for this Michigan team. Indiana is going to have to try and limit them, but they're most dangerous on the ground.
For Indiana looking to pull off an upset today over the Wolverines, what's a player position group you'll be watching that would help Tom Allen's team go to 3-0 on the season?
I think it starts and ends with the quarterback. Michael Penix has to be better today, and the key for him is getting off to a good start. Indiana needs to score quickly. Indiana needs to have a good drive in the first quarter. They've scored just 3 points in the entire season in the first quarters. Would like to see Michael Penix not only have a good game, but get off to a hotter start today.
All right, Austin, does Indiana pull it off, finally break the 24-year streak IU fans have been waiting such a long time for?
I don't think so, Griff. Indiana's struggles line up with Michigan's successes. Michigan can run the ball. Indiana has struggled to show that they run the ball. Michigan can stop the run. Indiana has showed that they cannot run the ball in the first 2 weeks. Indiana's going to need to prove that these first 2 weeks are a room for improvement instead of the ceiling. And if that's the case, Indiana could come out with a win today.
Well, Austin, disappointing Hoosier fans a little bit, but they'll try to surprise the country and knock off Michigan and go to 3-0 in the Big Ten. For Austin Render, I'm Griffin Epstein. Stay tuned to the Hoosier Network all day for more coverage from Memorial Stadium and beyond.
Hey, thank you guys. Appreciate that live update from Memorial Stadium. I now want to bring in Jack Ankeny, who's going to be joining us once again. We're going to talk a little pregame discussion here about what he gets to look forward to today in this coverage of the game. Jack, I want to focus on Indiana. We heard a little scouting report there from Griff at the stadium, and I want to go really into who this team is heading into week 3 today. We talked about who they were last week. We talked about who they were against Penn State. Let's focus on who they are going to be against Michigan, okay? First off, I want to ask a simple question for you. Who is this Indiana team today?
Right. This Indiana team today, I think, is going to be one that might lean more on the pass compared to the run. You know, we heard Daniel talk about how the Michigan secondary is probably the weakest unit on the team. And so I think Penix with that big arm is going to try to exploit that. I think we will not see as quite the workload for Stevie Scott and Samson James as we saw last week. I think it was 20 carries for Scott and 7 for James. I don't think we'll see a number quite as high, just because Michigan's defensive line is very talented with Kwity Paye, Aiden Hutchinson, So I think we're going to see a little bit more passing today from Penix.
All right, sounds good. Now, we've seen Indiana improve week by week here. We start off really slow against Penn State. Then Rutgers, they get it back, get a little more momentum on their side. But there were still a lot of issues in that Rutgers game that didn't cost them the game, but definitely kept it closer than they would have liked. What areas does Indiana need to improve this week before facing off against Michigan?
Yeah, I think you said it. Better start to the games. I think that's huge today. We heard Austin say if they can get a solid drive in the first quarter, that would be something that we haven't really seen. I think cleaning up the penalties. We talked about how Rutgers scored 2 touchdowns immediately after a roughing the passer penalty. That happened twice last week. I think third down conversions is where Indiana has also struggled. And I think the offensive line, we talked about the Michigan D-line with Paye and Hutchinson. They're big threats up there. So I think Indiana's offensive line is also going to have its best day today.
All right, I want to talk Mike Penix now. Quarterback, we love talking about him on the show. This is a big one for you, Jack. I'm going to ask you the good old-fashioned Joe Flacco question here. Is Michael Penix an elite quarterback in Big Ten? When I say elite, I mean top 4, top 5.
Yeah, just in the Big Ten, I think he's top 5 in the Big Ten for sure. I think he, compared to some other quarterbacks in the conference, he is kind of that true dual threat where sometimes, you talk about a dual threat, that kind of means, oh, he's not that great of a passer. He's more, but he can run the ball. I think Penix is kind of the reverse while still maintaining that tag. He's got the big arm, but he also likes to use his feet, not just for running, but more to kind of just open up that pocket, get outside, let the play develop more. So yeah, I'd say he's top 5 in the Big Ten for sure.
Okay, I accept that. I guess we're good with that. Top 5 in the Big Ten is not a bad thing, I guess, especially since, Wisconsin's in limbo, but definitely an impressive number. Let me ask you this, kind of piggybacking off that last Penix question. What does QB Mike Penix need to do a little better that we haven't seen so far this year?
I think we haven't quite seen him exploit the deep ball, and I think that's something that we could see today. Michigan has really struggled, especially last week in the loss to Michigan State, with those more downfield passes. I think you could see a couple deep shots to Whop Philly or Ty Freifogel. I think Indiana could try to exploit him that way. I think Penix is going to have to play his best game of the year if Indiana wants to win, and I think he's up for the challenge, though.
Up for the challenge, indeed. He will have to be today. Michigan, those quarterbacks, not the best that they usually are, so he might be able to have a big day passing the football today. But I want to ask you about the Penix-led offense now. Stevie Scott, kind of a slower start. Penix, kind of a slower start. Whop Phillier, kind of a slower start. Overall, the Indiana offense isn't as poppy, is that a good word, that we saw last season? My question is, for you, Jack, are you confident if Indiana's offense has to win games down the stretch, are you confident in their ability to do so?
I'm going to say I'm not super confident in that because we've seen a lot of games this year where Indiana's defense is coming up with the timely, takeaways to set up the Indiana offense. So I think at this point in the season, I'm not very confident if it's a game where Indiana's offense is going to have to be, the number one reason if it becomes a shootout. I don't know if that's a game where Indiana in its current state is ready to win a game like that. I think going into the season, we thought that the offense was going to be much more explosive than it has shown to be. So I think it can get to a point later in the season, but right now I'd say I wouldn't be too confident in that situation.
Okay, sounds good. But one thing you have to be confident through in week 1 and week 2 is this Indiana defense who's just been, stout as all get out. They've been tough. They've been playing, hanging their own, getting stops on third down, all things we're really not used to with this team. Talk to me about the confidence you see in this Indiana defense today, and are they going to be able to stop Michigan's pretty solid power run offense?
Yeah, I think the kind of run game is what's going to come down to today for the Indiana defense. Milton passed for 300 yards last week. I don't think he's going to get to that number this week just because of the talent that we've seen on the IU secondary, which means I think they're going to go more on the run game. Joe Milton likes to make plays with his feet. They got a couple talented running backs back there, which I think is going to challenge that IU defensive line. I think we're seeing Indiana's defense play with a lot more confidence this year. You see them get excited after some of those big plays. They're starting to, really feel like that they're a unit that can lead this team.
All right, I want to talk to you more about this defensive breakdown for me. Who has been the most stout player on this Indiana defense? I'm going to make you pick one here. Okay,
I'll go with Micah McFadden. I think he's been kind of that traditional leader at linebacker that you envision on a stud defense. So I'll go with him. While I think the secondary as a group has been the best on this team.
Well, that secondary certainly is tough to play against. Tywan Mullen back there, holding down the fort. It's been a pretty solid season for that Indiana defense. Jack, I want to ask, what does Indiana need to do today? The big takeaways to get a complete win over this Michigan team.
Right. I think the big things for Indiana is like we talked about, clean up the penalties. They're going to have to play a really clean game in order to take down Michigan. They can't have any plays where they're hurting themselves. And then 2, I think we've talked about this a lot. It's Michael Penix. Can he have that good start like we've discussed? I think also with Indiana, it could come down to a situation where it comes down to is Penix going to get the passes off to try to exploit that weak secondary before, Kwity Paye and Aiden Hutchinson get to him? Because they're two guys that, right now are projected as first-round picks in next year's draft. So I think that really challenges the IU offensive line. So it could come down to, can Penix kind of, get the passes off against a weaker secondary for Michigan before those big guys up front for Michigan get to him?
Well, Jack, that sounds all good to me. Thanks for coming on. I know we have you coming on in the breakdown in just a few minutes to talk with Tom Green about kind of this Michigan team, and we're going to ask you guys some questions and ask you guys to go back and forth, make it a little fiery of a conversation today.
All right.
But right before I let you go and we move on, I got to know, before we get over to Tom Green, final prediction, what's going to happen in this Indiana football game today?
Griffin, I've really gone back and forth with this one all week, and because part of me is saying, you look at the first two games, and Indiana is obviously had a more successful season than Michigan after their worst loss under Jim Harbaugh. So is that enough to rewrite history that has had Michigan win 24 straight games? I think I'm going with Michigan in this one. I think 27-24 is the number that I've kind of come to. I think it's going to be a great game. I'm really looking forward to this one.
Well, Jack, should be a good Can you hear me all right there?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, we lost you there for a second, man. Sorry about that. One last question for you before I let you go, okay? While we're figuring stuff out on our end. Break it down for me. Who's the offensive player of the game today? Who's the defensive player of the game, in your opinion, for the Hoosiers?
Well, we saw for Indiana, this is kind of an easy one for me, I think. I think it's Whop Phillier. I think that's a predictable one that a lot of IU fans would say. He had a big week last week, 137 yards. We've discussed how this Michigan secondary is very inexperienced. They got exploited last week against Rocky Lombardi and that Michigan State offense, which I don't think is quite to the level of the Indiana offense. So I'll go with Whop Phillier on the Indiana side.
Intercepted Ashawn Riggins.
Former IU defensive back Ashawn Riggins came to IU in 2016 to start on the football team as a freshman. But by his junior season, he'd suffered from 2 concussions and the trauma of losing consciousness, which led to his diagnosis of anxiety and depression in 2018, changing his journey forever.
Going into my junior year, I had told my coaching staff and trainers that if I suffered from another concussion, I would be done. And so I was alternating, starting and not starting. And then I just wasn't doing good in school. I was kind of distancing myself from my friends. Just wasn't really happy. And September 25th, on a Tuesday in the middle of a practice week, we were playing against Rutgers that week. I had attempted suicide.
Ashawn's efforts extended beyond the football field. He found the drive and motivation necessary to help those struggling with mental health issues like himself. He built a program for IU athletes to make sure that what happened to him wouldn't happen to anyone else.
Came up with the idea of starting a mental health program, Real Spill, Real Stories, where people, male athletes came in and had just an open dialogue about whatever they wanted to talk about. It was just the whole idea of letting loose as men and, normalizing the dialogue, mental health challenges.
According to sports psychologist and associate professor at IU, Dr. Jesse Steinfeld, athletes are still warming up to the idea that caring for their mental health should be normalized.
There's still a stigma around psychology, and particularly sports psychology, that you're weak or you're lesser because you seek help. The reality is we flip the script and say, man, you're strong. This is like a strength conditioning coach in the weight room. We're going to make you mentally strong.
Riggins is now in his first year of graduate school at the IU School of Education. He's pursuing a master's degree in mental health counseling with the ultimate goal of becoming a sports therapist.
We don't emphasize sports psychology enough, and I think that we need to.
Great job there, Tamar. Really enjoyed that one. Really serious story, but Sean Riggins, what a story. Fantastic. Well, we now move on to the breakdown segment, which is my personal favorite. We're joined by two guests today. Jack Ankeny back for his third time. Jack, you're going to need a nap after this. I don't know if you're going to make the game. And a special guest, Tom Green, joining the show. Tom, good to see you. Tom,
yes, great to be with you there, Griffin.
Introduce yourself to the crowd and tell us where you're from, where you're recording from, and how you doing?
Well, certainly. I'm doing pretty good. And before we get started, great segment there on mental health. It's definitely a thing that we all got to take care of, especially in the year 2020. Take care of yourselves as well as others. My name is Tom Green. I am from Essexville, Michigan. Actually, Ben Van Sumeren is, of course, a linebacker on the Michigan Wolverines, graduated from Essexville Garber. I've done the public address announcing for Garber for many years now, and it actually vaulted me to a job at WLEW Radio in Bad Axe, which is where I am broadcasting to you from right now, doing the news and hoping that's getting back into sports. I'm also the host of the Tom Green podcast, at which Griffin was a guest on a couple of days ago, so check that out as you're listening to the game, or perhaps at halftime, since we're so close to kickoff. Be sure to listen to that. We had a great conversation about this game earlier this week.
And Tom, I want to start with you. The first question's going your way.
Okay.
Let me break it down for you, okay? Michigan 1-1, okay? It's still kind of trying to figure out what this team's identity is. So in your case scenario, you've watched this team. You've seen the Harbaugh teams through the years. Who is this Michigan team?
To put it in 3 words, I don't know. But to put it in a long version, Michigan is 1-1, but in the way that nobody expected. A lot of people thought this team would lose to the Minnesota Golden Gophers and PJ Fleck, rowing the boat, of course. But we saw that PJ Fleck's Minnesota team really isn't the team that we thought they were, especially losing to Talia Tagovailoa and Maryland. So this team beat up Minnesota, and we thought, man, this team could perhaps run the table, maybe even have a shot at Ohio State. And then all of a sudden State comes in, and their problem was turnovers. Like I'd said on the podcast earlier, turnovers are great at Arby's, not on the field. So State cleaned up their turnover game and beat Michigan that way. Yes, Michigan was a 20-point favorite too, so a lot of disappointment here in Michigan country. But this game is definitely a turning point in this season. Because one way, if Michigan wins this game, you're riding high on this emotion and perhaps maybe even winning the rest of your games sans Ohio State. But if you lose this game, all of a sudden you're looking at 1-2 and perhaps Harbaugh not even making it through this season. So this is a turning point game in this season, and hopefully, at least on my side, Michigan comes away with it.
And Jack, now I want to bounce down to you, okay? So here's the deal. We've saw this Indiana team. We already talked about areas that they need to improve on. We basically talked about it your 2 segments today, so I'm going to flip the script on you, okay? What has Indiana done extremely well already this season through 2 games that they need to continue doing well?
Right. Well, I think the defense has really capitalized in situations where really the team has needed them the most. Against Penn State, they had those 2 really key turnovers in Penn State territory that allowed them to score and kind of hang with Penn State in that game. And then I also think, the linebackers, it's really the defense as a whole with the linebackers and corners. I think The run game we saw really performed a lot better last week with the addition of Samson James, who a lot of the IU coaches have since he joined this team. So I think kind of getting that run game back to where it was last week is also going to be important today.
Yeah, very important indeed. The run game was basically non-existent week one, so to have it back is definitely an advantage for the Hoosiers if they can get it on the ground going today. Tom, I'm coming back to you now, all right?
Alrighty.
You talked about at the end of that last segment, you said basically this future of Harbaugh, if he loses his game today, he might be seeing that front door exit a little sooner than expected. I got to ask, you're the Michigan guy. You've seen the years with Harbaugh a lot closer than
Sure.
Jack and I have. Is he the right guy for the job?
My short answer, I really, really want to say yes, but it's really looking like no. I had talked about it on the show before. My thought was this team is exactly where Georgia was back in 2013. If you remember the phone calls that Colin Cowherd and Paul Feinbach took. Oh, we got to get rid of Rick. We got to get rid of Rick. Well, who are you going to replace him with? And now that's the big question that's encircling this team is if Harbaugh is not the guy, well, who do you replace him with? My first initial thought would be Brent Venables, but does he want to leave Clemson is the real question. So is he the guy for the job? I would honestly say no, but you run into the question of who are you going to replace him with? And right now that answer is not as easy as you would think.
I mean, yeah, it's kind of weird. You're complaining about. I mean, here, hold on. We're IU over here, okay? So we've been complaining about coaches if they can't win 3, maybe 4, but if they're winning 5, that's a good coach in IU's history. All right, so well, as long as we're losing to Ohio State, if that's our only loss, we're usually satisfied over here in Bloomington. So definitely an interesting point of view for Wolverines fans. Now, Jack, let me flip the script on you. Because while Wolverines aren't happy with their coaching situation, Indiana could not be happier. Tom Allen signed a 7-year contract extension last year, including the evergreen clause, which basically means if he keeps getting better, he's going to keep having a job. So talk to me about how Coach Allen has been able to do this thing that no other coach really in Indiana history has been able to do in such a short amount of time.
Right, Griffin. Well, he slowly built Indiana into a real threat in the Big Ten, just in terms of beating these teams, kind of like Penn State and Michigan. I think in the first couple of years under Allen, you'd look at Indiana's schedule and you could mark down 4 pretty easy losses each year to kind of those, the Michigan State, Penn State, Ohio State. It seemed like those were going to be losses every year. And this year he's kind of turning it into where we've seen them defeat Penn State. I think it's going to be a great, really close game today against Michigan. And so I think really what's been the difference is the players on this IU team and really the fans too have bought into what Tom Allen is building here. He's starting to recruit a lot better than a lot of IU coaches have in recent years. He's got that Florida connection that's helped him get guys like Michael Penix. So I think recruiting in terms of he's just getting the talent here, but it's also that sense that IU believes that they can hang with some of these better teams in the Big Ten East.
And speaking of hanging with some of these better teams in the Big Ten East, we're going to toss it over to Tom now. Tom, you have the outside view looking in at this Big Ten conference, okay? Indiana has been able to hold it tight with Michigan numerous times over the past 10 years. It's been actually a pretty decent matchup if you exclude, last year's blowout in Bloomington. So
no, that counted.
Indiana, have they earned the respect of teams like Michigan and Ohio State and Penn State, or is it still kind of just sitting there like, they're still our little brother in the Big Ten?
This is a question I can answer 2 ways. Personally, I say yes because they have come so close so many times in the past 3 seasons. Even when Kevin Wilson was coaching this squad, they came close to beating Ohio State a couple of times. Yes, Ohio State ran away in the 3rd and 4th quarter of said games, but even when Kevin Wilson was coaching, they did come close a couple of times. So personally, I say yes. As far as the rest of the Big Ten East goes, I would say Maryland, Rutgers, and now Penn State have said yes. Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State have said No. Michigan State, I think if Indiana beats Michigan State this year, then State moves down to the yes list of the respect meter. But so far, Michigan and Ohio State would say no, not yet. But I said it before on my show that one of these years it's going to happen, and it's going to happen at a time when Michigan fans simply don't want it to happen. And I hope to God it's not this year, but you never know. One of these years is going to happen, so perhaps it could be this year. Who knows? But so personally, yes. Looking at the division-wise, I would say half and half.
Tom, I'm coming right back to you with this one.
Okay.
Just a quick hitter for you. We talked about it earlier in the show. We talked about it on your podcast the other day. Jim Harbaugh can't really beat rivals. And 1-6 all-time at the Big House against MSU and Ohio State. What is it about making it a rivalry game that just makes it 10 times harder for him to beat them?
To be completely honest, I really couldn't tell you. Psychologically, there's something going on in that locker room that did not resonate well, or they just can't get over. I think, believe it or not, I think the punt back in 2015 has something to do with it. Yes, even 5 years ago, had that punt went off well, that game is a victory. 2017 in the rain, if I forget his name, but if he doesn't drop the pass, there perhaps you could have a victory there. Ohio State in 2016, JT was short. We can say that, but Curtis Samuel should have been stopped in the backfield on the play before that. There's just a couple of things here or there that just did not bounce our way, and sadly, it's just gotten into our head psychologically. At least that's how I see it. Maybe others don't, but it's just a psychological advantage, and they're just going to have to get that victory at some point, and that time may have just run out. We'll see.
I've been saying it all week. I said, let's just go in a press conference and say, hey, Michigan's our new big rival. And I think that might have worked. I'm going to be honest. I think that might have worked for Tom Allen and the Hoosiers today. Might have given them a little bit of an advantage. But here's what I'm going to do. The power invested in me, Jack Ankeny. 10 minutes till kickoff. I just actually named you the head coach of the Indiana Hoosiers. You're getting ready to go out there, face the Wolverines. What do you say to the team before you head out there to get this victory? What are your keys?
Right. So I'm telling my team, I'm saying, hey, we got to come out fast today. This has been a huge problem that has plagued us in the Penn State and Rutgers game, even though we were able to overcome it. But this Michigan team is not Rutgers, because even after a shaky start, I think Michigan has a lot of talent up and down the roster, and they really do not want to be 1-2, especially Jim Harbaugh, because a couple more losses this season could mean the end of his time at Michigan. I'm telling the guys, I'm saying, hey, play loose. Let's play smart. Let's not make some of those penalties that have hurt us the last couple of games. Again, let's tackle well in the open field. That's something that's been a strength, especially for the Indiana defense. And Griff, LEO.
You had to finish with the LEO there?
Yep, I had to.
All right. I see how it is. All right, Tom, a more likely scenario, okay, Jim Harbaugh is out at Michigan. You are now the head coach. The thing is, they did it actually before the game, not after. Didn't want to really watch it. So let me ask you, you're now the head coach at Michigan. What are you telling the Wolverines before they head out there to get the keys to the game and really focus up and beat Indiana?
Do not take this opponent lightly. Yes, Michigan has beaten Indiana every single time since 1987, but guess what? These aren't your father's Hoosiers. You want to record that for your own segment? I encourage you to. But these aren't your father's Hoosiers. They can beat you. They just beat Rutgers and Penn State. Do not take them lightly. Defense, Penix is going to attack the corners, like I said on my podcast. Last year, you had Lavert Hill and Ambry Thomas as your corners. Lavert is in the NFL. Ambry was a COVID opt-out. You have freshmen as your corners. They're going to throw at them all day. Get the defensive line to get to the quarterback right away so that he can't throw to the corners. Offensively, the offensive line has been a problem on this team for roughly 10 years, sadly, ever since Rich Rod and Hoke. It's becoming a problem again. We need to attack with Charbonnet and Haskins and get through that offensive line. Milton, I trust his feet more than his arm. I hope to change that by the end of today. If he can get solid throws to Eubanks, Nico Collins was an opt-out, but his wide receivers and others, perhaps we could see a victory today. So It's just a combination of don't take this team lightly and line play. Defensive line's got to get to Penix before he can throw to the corners. Offensive line has to protect for the run.
Hey, sounds good to me. Sounds like both of those sound like pretty good recipes for success. We'll see what happens. Final thing before we let you guys go, I need the score prediction from both of you. Jack, let's hear it.
Yeah, I think we're going to see an extremely good game today. I'm going Michigan pulls this one out 27-24.
27-24, close. Okay, all right. Tom, how about you?
Well, I hope you're right, Jack, but I'm taking the negative perspective, but I hope I'm wrong. Indiana 31, Michigan 27. Prove me wrong. I really hope they do.
I like Jack's ability to cover the spread there. I like to go with Michigan covering. Yeah, Jack, I think he's secretly betting under the table. That's why he's kind of hoping. No?
Nah.
Just a little bit? No. Okay, good. You're a good journalist there, Jack. Tom
Thank
Green,
you.
Jack Ankeny, thanks so much for joining us today, gentlemen. Go watch the game and enjoy what football has to offer us here on this glorious Saturday.
Awesome.
Thanks so much, Griffin.
Well, there you go. Tomorrow we celebrate. We're going to move back to the not that far of a walk. And, wow. Tom's got a personality, man. I'll tell you, it's fun.
I love it. I was going to say, your takes were awesome. Just this entire show, I love when we have these guest-filled shows. That's what makes it fun. That's what keeps it alive. And I think everyone is really confident in this Indiana team, which is really exciting for us here in Bloomington.
Confidence indeed is not in shortage here in Bloomington. Hopefully that does not plague the Hoosiers today. Tomorrow, I think you're feeling pretty good. I got to ask. What's your pick today?
Gosh, I want to say, I don't know. I think that Michigan might be upsetting us in Indiana today because they are going to be coming off, like I was saying before, I really do think that they're going to come out with that ferocity because they're angry,
Yeah.
They're angry for losing to Michigan State. And Indiana, although they're prepared, I feel like they might come into this with a little bit of a hot head. So we'll see. I hope Indiana proves me wrong, but I'm going to take the latter.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree there, okay? Listen, Michigan has never lost 2 regular season Big Ten games in a row under Jim Harbaugh in 5 years at Michigan. I think that ends today. I'm going Indiana, and you know what? I'm going to go 34-21. 34-21. 34-24. Let's go that. I feel safe. They're going to get a field goal, I bet. Anyway, for Tamar's share, I've been Griffin Gonzalez. This has been week 3 of The Rundown. We'll be back next week getting you ready for Michigan State. But for right now, get out there, go enjoy some football. We'll see you next time right here on The Rundown, presented by the Hoosier Network.